Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to FIDM's ongoing series, The Future of. The topic this month is zero waste, and there is a lot of interest in this topic, judging from the RSVPs and the questions that you all have already submitted. My name is Tom Hinkenius. I'm the director of FIDM's bachelor's degree in digital marketing. We felt it seemed pretty apt to start a new year with a discussion around sustainability and waste and the circular economy. The basic question we're hoping to answer today is, can we actually get to zero waste? And I want to acknowledge pretty clearly that the reason so many of us are focused on creating the circular economy is really just due to global warming. We know that the climate is changing. We know that that theory is no longer just that. It is in actuality happening, and we are seeing it unfold before our very eyes. And while we may not address it directly as we answer and talk today, I just want you to know that we are fully aware that that is why we're having this conversation. The four people I'll be speaking with over the next hour today have each in their own unique way blazed new trails that I think so many of us can learn lessons from. Over the next hour, we'll speak with Tyla Abbitt. She's the founder of Āether Beauty, and before that was the head of product development at Sephora. We'll also speak with Alison Sharalumbus. She's the senior manager of sustainability at Spark Group, where she oversees the sustainability and regulatory compliance programs of, as you can see, Nautica, Aeropostale, and Lucky Brand. We will also talk with Jasmine Rennie. She's a FIDM alum who launched the brand Grace Made as an ethical fashion brand, quickly realized that ethical fashion goes hand in hand with sustainability. So we'll talk to her about that realization and how she's been bringing it to practice in her brand as it grows. But I want to start with a brand that is well established, that has grown quite a bit since it was founded in the 1960s. Carol Hsu is the senior manager of global sustainability at The North Face. Carol's portfolio includes everything from retail waste to finding sustainable products and materials. And as I invite her to turn on her camera, I guess we'll start with this. I think what really surprised me most preparing for today is how deeply ingrained in the North Face DNA sustainability actually is. So I wonder maybe if we'll just first have you walk us through that. What is that DNA? What do you all do as part of your sustainability efforts?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So the North Face was founded in 1966 by Doug Tompkins. He was, pretty much just a dirtbag climber who wanted to make really good outdoor gear. So we started out as a really small shop in North Beach in San Francisco. And Doug actually only owned the company for 2 years. Hap Klopp is actually the one who really instilled a lot of our early values into the company. He started our lifetime warranty program 5 years after our brand was started. So we've had a warranty for 50 years now. We have a long history of trying to keep products in our customers' hands for as long as possible. So we want them to repair them, to love them for many years before they give them back to us for responsible management.
So that is part of your program then, this retail take back program. When a program or when a product comes back to you, what happens to it?
Yeah, so we've had a consumer take back program in all of our stores since 2012. And we partner with a nonprofit called Souls for Souls. They're a social enterprise. So they're trying to help small micro entrepreneurs start their own businesses in different countries around the world. And we want to make sure that the products get as much use as possible before they end up, ultimately, ideally as raw materials for a new cycle of products.
So I'm hearing for sure that you guys have been at this for a while, but what's especially interesting to me, at least as I was doing some research for today, is that the North Face continues to look for innovative ways to address sustainability. 2019, this must have been under your leadership. You guys launched a program that, if I understand it correctly, challenges the designers within the North Face to create more sustainable products.
Yeah. So in 2019, we launched a program called the Design Residency, and it built off of a program we created in 2018 called the North Face Renewed. So Renewed is our refurbished clothing program. So these are gently used products that we've cleaned and repaired. And as a complement to that, we sent a group of designers to our Renewed partner, the Renewal Workshop. They're based in Cascade Locks, Oregon. So our designers spent a whole week there at their facility, and they learned what the most common repairs were for our products. They learned like where there were more common seam tears, or where zippers were failing. They worked really closely with the Renewal Workshop's technicians and dug through piles and piles of damaged product. And so that really helped them think more thoughtfully about, okay, in the future, if I design a similar pair of pants, where am I going to put these seams? How do I reinforce them? How do we use different trims that might be more easily repairable? A grommet or something that's, like a snap might be more challenging to replace than a button in the future. So not only thinking about how they design better, but also how they design for repairability, and then ultimately design for reuse and disassembly. So this is a video of our designers at the Renewal Workshop. You can see them, those are all the piles of clothing. Our designers actually Frankenstein some unique one-of-a-kind pieces together while they were there. So you can see them working on that. These really amazing bespoke pieces were auctioned off actually for our Explore Fund, our grant giving program. And while the designers were there, they also trained the Renewal Workshop's technicians on how to make these unique repairs at scale. So we know that upcycling is generally limited because you have, maybe one tiny piece of a print fabric, and scaling unique products like this is difficult. So what our designers really did was they learned from the technicians like what the most common damages are, but they also taught the technicians in the future, if you get a repair on the front of a down jacket, use a creative print to patch it. The technicians are trained to make these products look like they are brand new. Our renewed program is refurbished product where you can't tell that anything was ever wrong with it in the first place. And the design residency is different because we're actually helping the technicians make these one-of-a-kind, unique, refurbished, but also upcycled pieces.
I think what's so interesting about this is especially as you reference them as like Frankenstein products, clearly there's a particular target audience in mind. I have to guess it's a younger consumer who sort of likes the story behind it, likes to be able to share the story with others. Knowing this then endears them to your brand. Maybe they can't afford a brand new piece, but these Frankenstein-y pieces, that becomes something that's interesting to them. As it relates to sustainability, though, we've covered retail waste. And another part of your focus is sustainable materials. And from what I understand, the material piece is also a pretty hard nut to crack as well, right?
Yeah, the material piece is challenging. So we've done LCA's life cycle assessments on our key product categories. So apparel, equipment like backpacks, tents, and also footwear. And we know that more than 60% of our climate change impacts from our products is from materials and materials manufacturing alone. So that's raw material extraction, that's growing the cotton, it's spinning the yarn, it's processing the cotton, it's knitting or weaving the fabric. And so we have a lot of work to do in our supply chain to try to reduce those impacts, because we have science-based targets, and our science-based target for our scope 3, which is encompasses our supply chain footprint, is 30% by 2030, which is a very tall task.
I can only imagine. You were telling me the story of like sort of an example of how you guys did this work with one of your suppliers. I wonder if you can share that with everybody.
Yeah, so one of the ways that we're approaching our scope 3 reduction is by partnering with key suppliers who share our values in terms of decreasing our environmental footprint. And we're supporting them in making investments to their facilities. Maybe it's doing an evaluation of solar to see, does it make sense for them to invest in solar panels? Does it make sense for them to invest in wind energy or other alternative energy? And we also help them do evaluations of their facilities. So maybe they could upgrade their machinery and save water and energy and chemicals. One of our key suppliers in 2019 actually made a $4 million investment, which is quite a bit of money. And with our support, they were able to make a huge number of improvements at their facility. And they actually recouped more than 50% of their investment in less than a year. So it's paid off for them financially. And then for us as a company, that lowers the footprint of our materials that we're sourcing from them. And then for the industry overall, because in the outdoor industry, we share suppliers with our competitors, it also impacts their carbon intensity of their products too. So we're trying to drive those kinds of improvement projects with our key suppliers to not only help us with our footprint, but also just make bigger changes in the industry.
I'm so glad you are addressing this from the investment side as well, because in the end, if you can't make a business case for it, we all know that Wall Street's not going to let you do it. So I wonder what you think then when you look at the rest of the fashion industry, trend-driven, fast fashion-driven, so much waste from the consumer side. We get the product and then throw it away. And how do you think you can begin to make an effect on that part of it?
I think it's going to require brands to rethink value in their products and the value they get from having a longer consumer life cycle. So we have relationships with our consumers for the lifetime that they own a product, which can be like 50 years. You know, we get jackets from customers through our warranty program that they bought in the 70s when they were maybe in high school or college. So I think if brands, more fashion-driven brands, can see that value of having a longer life cycle with their customer, it's not just a one-time purchase, then that additional detail to quality, that additional detail you put into your supply chain, that can pay off for you. And you have to think about, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think it also requires just thinking about new business models, like our Renewed program offering refurbished products. What are you offering to additional customers so that you can continue to meet their needs, especially the younger generations?
It really sounds like you are almost in a way challenging the industry to sort of rethink the basic premise of the way it functions today, right? A different business model, a longer life cycle for not just the product, but the consumer itself, he or she, or they. Do you think that's I mean, one of the questions submitted in advance is this really practical? Is this attainable? This zero waste? Do you think it is, or could we not change the industry that much?
I think it is attainable. It's not going to be easy. And it's going to take a lot of collaborative effort. It's going to take effort on the part of the brands and also on the consumers. I think consumers, I hope they know how much buying power they have. Every purchase is tracked by companies. We pay very close attention to spending habits. And so I think you can make a big difference just by being more conscientious about how you shop, and brands that maybe aren't paying attention will start to pay attention.
It's a great point, and I'll put in a little plug. Next month, we're actually talking about data on our February version of this. So I think that will be a place where we can actually dig into that side of it and get a better understanding of the way brands are looking at that sort of data to make business decisions, but recognizing that it also impacts the supply chain. So I appreciate it. All right, Carol, thank you. If you have questions for Carol, for any of our panelists, everybody's familiar with this by now, but there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to use it. We will get to the questions at the end of our hour together. For now, though, I thank Carol and would like to welcome Tyla Abbott, the founder of Āether Beauty. Tyla started her career in the apparel industry. She was working in knitwear when her boss sent her to China, which opened her eyes to the product life cycle of products. Worked with Sephora as a head of product development in charge of their private label, where she actually started researching sustainability and kind of volunteered for the position for a while. That leads her to launching her own beauty brand, which launched the first fully recyclable zero waste palette in the entire beauty industry. I was shocked to learn some of the stats around the beauty industry and waste. But I think, though, it's important to understand that history to get the full picture of the work that you're currently doing at your brand now. You describe your brand as slow beauty, similar, I'm assuming then, to slow fashion. But rather than me living on my assumptions, why don't you explain to me what you mean by slow beauty?
Sure. So just very similar to slow fashion. It's a more thoughtful and aligned approach to producing and consuming cosmetics. So it really means taking the time to evaluate our beauty products' impact on the people, planet, and animals. It means choosing consciously and producing sustainably for better quality, ethically created products that will really last, which is sort of opposite the concept in beauty, because beauty is really all about seasonal product launches. You know, if you're on your phone, like there's a new product launch practically daily in the beauty industry, and it's just become this faster and faster space, and it's a race to the bottom with this overconsumption model. And it's just about how cheap does it take to get somebody to purchase a product. And what I've learned in my experience being a designer with all my random backgrounds, when there's something so cheap, there's probably a human cost to it. So I always challenge people to not be like, oh my God, this is $1, I need to get it. Ask instead, why is this only costing $1?
I was fascinated when I was looking at some of your branding, specifically on your packaging, which I know the packaging is all recyclable, but you do not include on your palette a mirror and no magnet. And I wonder if you can explain why.
Sure. So it's really interesting in the beauty space. So what happens when you're a brand or you work for a retailer is you always go through manufacturers, right? So you go through a manufacturer for your packaging and a manufacturer for your formulation. And when you're producing packaging and you're buying packaging, you know, you're working with this manufacturer, and you usually are buying things off the shelf, right? Because a lot of people can't afford to create their own molds for a product. And when I first started, you know, I really counted on those manufacturers to understand the ins and outs when it came to recyclability and materials and all of that. And then I started to learn all of these astonishing facts about the industry. So learning that annually we produce over 120 billion with a B components every year that are not getting recycled. And so asking why and what's going on and those sort of things. And when I was ideating the brand, I actually met with every single packaging engineer I ever met and just kept asking questions. And so what I found out, and doing my own research, you know, when I was talking to the packaging people, all they would ever give me was bamboo. They're like, oh, we did this eco collection 10 years ago. Here's some bamboo samples we still have. And I was like, no, not Whole Foods granola. This can be done in a sustainable, cool way. And so I just kept asking questions. And so I started talking to my suppliers and okay, well, if I utilize paper, does paper make it more recyclable? No, not necessarily. It depends on the print, the inks and the layers of plastic that are on top of it. So you just keep asking and asking and asking until you can kind of figure out a solution. So for me, it was kind of like playing Tetris. Nothing I did was patentable, reinventing the wheel. I just figured it out. So I learned by going to recycling facilities that mirrors and magnets are not recyclable at all. Who knew, right? So mirrors, you know, if every single component on this planet, when it comes to a makeup palette, has a freaking mirror in it. And just by removing the mirror, you're making it more accessible to actually being recycled. And then magnets on top of it. So with a magnet, the areas that you mine the ingredients for magnets create horrible human conditions with the toxins that they're breathing in, with what happens to the community. And we have magnets in everything. We have it in our computers right now and in our phones and sort of everywhere. And they're added on components to make it feel more heavy and more luxurious. And I'm like, how is that luxury if you're affecting these people's lives who are mining for it? And it's just really taking this mindset of, you know, almost where you're discovering and sourcing your ingredients to packaging, and really understanding the ins and outs of packaging and understanding our infrastructures, understanding how something actually works in our systems, because people don't even know how to recycle. There's all this wish cycling that happens out there, which I
Right.
totally used to be guilty of. And my husband used to yell at me and be like, we don't recycle this in San Francisco. And I'm like, oh, but they might, and that actually causes more harm than good before I really learned how it all works. So for me, I also launched the first fully recyclable liquid lip component that's also 100% PCR. And it's learning which plastics can get recycled. It's learning how to actually make something the same material through and through. So I think beauty just got wrapped up in this like 80s explosion of luxury, of harder components and heavy and stuff. And nobody was looking at what the materials were doing, how they're ending up in our landfills. Sort of, it's this concept that you as the consumer are responsible for what happens to it after you buy it, where in my perspective is that whoever's creating this stuff, it should be their responsibility, because I don't want to create a brand or create products that my children have to be responsible for cleaning up later.
There's so many like things I would love to just dive into in what you said there, but I think there's a lot to take in. Specifically, this concept of like the responsibility or the onus is on us, the consumer, I think is so fascinating. The challenge though, and this is how I'm going to tie this back to you, is that by us going to a more sustainable future, it's more expensive. The cost to the consumer goes up. And so I wonder from a business point of view, your cost of goods, I'm assuming, are higher than an average beauty company. You've sort of already alluded to that. So from a business point of view, how is this going for you?
I mean, the business has exploded. I have been completely self-funded since day one. So to be $1 million brand without funding is pretty incredible, considering I have no digital marketing experience. It's been me like running the whole ship until recently. So I'm really excited because I finally have been able to hire some people to help me. But the brand is found in many retailers, including Sephora, Credo, Detox Market. What makes it difficult actually is more investors. So investors are used to, in the beauty space, these brands that have really cheap ingredients, especially in this race for overconsumption and, race for the bottom, where you can buy makeup anywhere. You can buy it at the grocery store. You can buy it anywhere you go these days. And so it's just created this crazy model where, from the packaging piece, if people aren't asking questions, it's the same thing with the ingredient piece. So there's not a lot of transparency in this industry whatsoever. Normally, when you work with a contract manufacturer, they're not telling you where they're sourcing their raw ingredients. They're not even telling you the ingredient list until you place a PO. Like, it's very, very hush hush. And I think it's this fear that you're going to just take the formula and run with it with a different manufacturer. But typically, if you're a brand and you work with a manufacturer, you give them a brief, which includes the cost you want to pay for it and like what the formula does and shades and blah, blah, blah. But there's no discussion on, why is something, costing this cheap? And manufacturers are just trying to make their own profits on it and their own margins. So the cheaper they can source a raw material, the more profit that they make. So it just creates this crazy cycle where with me, I created this palette, and this is the first product I launched, which is the Rose Quartz palette, but it is like an Anastasia, an Urban Decay palette and a half. So you're getting a ton of product in here. And, people have this misconception that clean beauty must not have a longer shelf life, that it doesn't work as well. But basically, this will last you 3 to 4 years after you open it. So, to take that concept into a space where people are launching products every day is very anti the beauty industry, right? But for me, the bigger you buy something in bulk, the less you rebuy it, the less packaging waste, the less waste overall. So that to me was what I really wanted to do. I really wanted to prove that you can be sustainable. I'm self-funded. I don't have piles of money to do this. I didn't create any molds. I didn't do any of that. So if I did that for free, besides like my hours, brands can do this. it takes research and time, but that's about it. And then on top of it, really teaching the client what they're purchasing. There's a reason if you're purchasing fair trade, child labor free, forced labor free. There are so many things that go on this industry that people don't talk about, but people really understand it in fashion for some reason. So I'm trying to get people to really come to this space and be like, hey, this is what's going on here. You guys should pay attention, because to the previous speaker's point, the consumer has so much purchasing power. And with this digital space, you are watched everywhere you go. So everyone is really tracking everything that you're doing as a purchaser. So if you are able to, tell people or question brands that you're working with, it really makes an impact on change in those brands.
Tyla, I could ask you a million questions, and obviously I already did because you and I talked previously, but I'm going to ask you to just pause for a moment. We'll come back with Q&A at the end. It's just what you're doing is so fascinating and interesting, and clearly there's more to be discussed. But for now, let's turn our attention to Alison Charolumbus. She's the Senior Manager of Sustainability at Spark, which includes the Lucky brand. She's also collaborating with the LA Mayor's Office on creative uses for textile waste in our community, attracting a textile recycler maybe to Los Angeles. Alison, what I didn't realize was how much waste was involved in the denim industry. The sampling process, excessive inventory, damaged goods, the chemicals, the washes. I mean, there's a lot of waste, and that puts a whole lot on your plate when you're trying to address sustainability. So where do you start? Where do you begin?
I mean, Tyla had a great point. You start by asking questions, and then I start with my designers and my production teams. And I always ask them to focus on areas of largest impact. So they come to me and they say, Alison, we have this new cotton button that's going to biodegrade. And I say, that's great. But if the rest of the product doesn't biodegrade, then let's not focus on the button. Let's focus on the raw materials. And Carol talks about this as well. There's tons of studies out there that already say your largest impact is going to be the fabric that you choose to put in the product, right? Because of the amount of resources that go in to grow it. And it's not going to be at improving efficiencies in the factory or necessarily in your logistics. So it's first raw materials, and then it's second how the consumer takes care of the product. So I asked them to make really wise choices, focusing on naturals, biodegradable materials, limiting the amount of synthetics in there. And then I ensure that the production team is well versed in the certifications for organic and recycled, which are pretty extensive chain of custody certifications, to ensure that when they finally send the product to production, that they're putting them in the right place and that we're actually getting the materials that the vendor is selling us. So organic and recycled, there's no lab tests out there that can identify recycled cotton or recycled cotton poly from a virgin cotton poly. So you have to do it through certifications at the factory level. And then again, to go back to the question point, it's just asking everybody to question their own processes, to not desensitize themselves to the amount of waste that we have in how we carry out our day-to-day work, and then question, do I need all these samples? Do I need all these denim tube legs? What's going to happen to them when they're done? And then even for planning and allocation to consider, to better practices about considering how much inventory they need.
I'm especially interested in an area, and you sort of have brought it up a little bit already, that you've done a lot of work, which is the apparel recycling. You have said, and I was fascinated, it caused me to go look at all of the denim in my closet to see what how the products were made, like what's involved. But there seems like an easy solution to just recycle all the product. But in fact, a lot of it isn't really recyclable at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a lot of conversations about recycling. I try and make the Ellen MacArthur's Jeans Redesign project be our Bible internally. And what Jeans Redesign says is that currently the most scalable form of apparel recycling is mechanical recycling. But in order for that to work, your amount of synthetics has to be limited to 2% of the entire garment. And all of us know that we're really attracted to polyester, whether it be for durability in the, outdoor industry, whether it be for stretch in the fast fashion, or even just, in a t-shirt. A good t-shirt can last you a decade if it has a certain amount of polyester in it. Unfortunately, it'll gum up the textile machine and the mechanical textile machine, and they won't be able to process it. So Tyla has that term was excellent, wishful recycling. We all just hope whatever we throw into that bin is going to get recycled. And the fact of the matter is that, I mean, I would say probably a fraction of it does actually make it. We don't have those symbols that you have on plastic containers, like 2 or 4, whatever it may be. We don't have that on apparel. So ultimately you buy this garment, and then that tag is itching you. So you cut it out. And when the textile recycler or Goodwill gets this, and then Goodwill sends it to a textile recycler, and the textile recycler looks, they have no idea what's in this sweater. So they have no idea what's in this sweater. If they maybe do a feel and say, I'm feeling like it's like too heavy in synthetics, I'm not going to risk sending it through my machine. So I'm going to throw it away, right? Because to them it becomes trash. Otherwise it becomes a liability. So under Jeans Redesigned, what they encourage is like unified symbols that identify a garment that's 2% synthetic, 98% cellulose based, and then therefore can be recycled in the mechanical textile recycling.
Would you somehow have to, with technology, embed it actually into the material? I mean, because your point is right, you cut it out. So how do you keep it there permanently?
Yeah, I mean, you keep it with these kind of like indelible markings that won't irritate a customer, encourage them to cut it out, and won't get washed off after, years of being washed.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, if you want to go into all sorts of fiber tracing, but that expectation would be that then the textile recycler also has that technology at their location to do that.
You said one of your personal goals is to have more things made locally. I was listening in on a chat at South by Southwest, I think 2 years ago, and one futurist was talking about how our grocery store of the future, you'll go in on the ground floor and the vegetables and produce will be grown on the second floor, obviously hydroponically. She talked about how your meat could be grown in a petri dish, all these things on the second floor, and then you eat it or purchase it rather on the first floor. And I'm wondering if you see a future where maybe specifically to the denim industry, where that's possible. Is that a future we're looking toward?
I think one of my personal biggest learnings during the shutdown and COVID times is that when in mid-March, when everything closed down, borders closed, we couldn't get containers out of countries, and everybody needed face masks, and the CDC was about to roll out the recommendation of face covering. We couldn't get face masks shipped to LA if we wanted them unless we manufactured them locally. Luckily, we had a local manufacturer, New Fashion, based in LA, who was able to make them with available fabric, right? Any fabric that he didn't have locally, again, was blocked at the border. But the process was extremely efficient once we identified him, and we found the fabric, and we were open to other options instead of open to the full menu of all fabrics across the world, just what was available. And we could send it to production pretty quickly. I mean, we got them out by early April, which a lot of, unless you were one of the small manufacturers like, Ref or Citizens who were doing them in their own factory, it was just not really possible for the larger brands like us to do that. And that was because it was local. And I think at any point in time, we could all shut down again. We have second variants of COVID and who knows what else is out there, and borders could shut, and large international supply chains like the ones that our brands have are very vulnerable to those issues. So I think local is something that we should consider, but also local impact. We made our masks in LA. We donated 100,000 masks in LA, and the relationships that we built with organizations by donating them there is, you know these people, they're in your neighborhood, they're in your city, right? And to focus on the people that are walking by your house every single day, who work in your office areas when we do go back to the office. Like, to me, that is a much more rewarding experience. And we're on the same time zone. It just makes work-life balance a lot better.
For sure. Okay, well, obviously we have more questions for you coming as well, but let me move to our final guest before we get to the Q&A. And again, please use the button at the bottom to submit your questions to us. Our final guest is Jasmine Rennie. She's a FIDM alumna who was recently named among Forbes 30 Under 30. Congratulations for that. In 2016, she started this brand called Grace Made with a focus on ethical production, which led to her to incorporate sustainable practices. Her garments are soon going to be available through Magnolia. That's the Chip and Joanna Gaines brand. They opened a women's retail store in Texas. She's also locally here in LA, sold inside Gallery LA at the Row in downtown. Jasmine, walk me through the process then. You started your company focused on ethical production, and you become a company that is focused now on incorporating sustainable practices. How does that mesh? How does it come together?
Yeah, so when I started the brand in 2016, it was a desire of my heart to do things ethically. The conversation around sustainability wasn't as loud as it is now. So to be honest, I didn't know too much about it. And so my main focus was producing locally so we could monitor and make sure that people were being treated fairly, being paid fairly, and then also just giving back, which we still do today with our charity partners of Life Impact International, and then just incorporating a slow fashion business model where we're creating less pieces, fewer collections, and focusing on creating thoughtful, timeless, seasonless designs so we can help discourage overconsumption. But as time went on, we kind of discovered how important sustainability was to our customers and our responsibility that we had to uphold those values as well. So we started doing our research and started incorporating in different ways that we can. But to be honest with you, we are still learning. There's so many different facets that go into it, from the labels to everything, how we're creating patterns. So we're just still doing our research, learning how we can become more sustainable. And yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I appreciate that point of view that you bring to this discussion, because I think that so many people are there, like they realize this is something they need to do, but what do I do? So what did you do? What have you done so far? What sustainable practices have you been able to incorporate?
Yeah, so far we have been using incorporating dead stock fabrics. And for those of you who do not know what dead stock is basically when bigger fashion houses have overproduced yardage of fabric, instead of it going to waste, we'll take it and then we will create our designs out of it. It can be limiting, but we get creative with it and use what we have. So that's one of the ways. Another way that we incorporate it is by using recycled packaging. So all of our packaging is recycled, all of our marketing materials are recycled. And then we also do upcycling scraps that are overproduced from production. So we've done fun installations with our retail partners where we'll do upcycled scrunchie workshop with scraps, leftover scraps from production, and different things like that. So there's so many ways I'm sure that we can still be using it, but that's how we've done it so far. And then on top of that too, what I forgot to mention is that we're also using eco fabrics. So we're using organic cottons, we're using tencel, we're using linen. And so every collection we find new ways to work that in. And so that's what we're doing so far.
What I'm loving about the video that we just showed, a good thing it's still playing, is that the marketer in me is screaming for joy that you're doing some activated marketing events, right? Like that you're not just preaching, but also practicing the sustainability and the practices that are embedded in your brand. Was that intentional, or was that just kind of like, oh, oops, and yeah, it works to be a marketing practice as well?
I don't think it was so much intentional, but I think that it was great because you end up educating the customers as well. You know, they get to learn about upcycling and learn about what you're doing, and also getting to promote the brand and have a fun shopping event. So it's always fun to have something interactive instead of just preaching about what we're doing, you know, bringing it to our customers and allowing them to be a part of it as well.
Yeah, like I say, the marketer in me is very proud of you for that effort you did right there. So what do you see now as the biggest challenges ahead of you?
Yeah, so as we begin to scale the company and we grow and we step into wholesale, it becomes a little difficult, especially working with dead stock fabric. Like I said, dead stock is super limited, which is great. But when you're working with wholesale and buyers want to order large quantities, then you hit a roadblock. And so what we're now having to do is either develop our own fabric or source eco fabrics to withhold that integrity of the sustainability aspect of our product. So that has become kind of tricky. And, you know, with buying and developing better fabrics, the price goes up, as some of the speakers have mentioned before me. But it's our responsibility, you know, to educate the customers on why the price is higher and what goes into the process and the value, and to show them that this is not something that is a one-time wear. We believe in lifetime wear, and this is something that an investment piece that you're keeping forever. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of challenges that we face, but we are just finding that education is just a key component.
It's interesting that you mentioned the consumer could potentially keep the piece forever. We heard North Face saying it took 5 years before they could actually begin doing their lifetime warranty. Is that
Right.
something that you are thinking about? Where are you at with that lifetime warranty on a piece that you're hoping they can keep for a lifetime?
Yeah, we definitely want to do it on that scale. We've kind of already been doing something like that. I mean, if customers reach out and we see that they need repairs or they were unhappy with something, or, you know, maybe a zipper hit a snag, we will gladly take it and we will replace it, and recycle the original piece or mend it. But we don't really broadcast it because we don't have the infrastructure. We're still pretty small to handle it to that scale and that level. But it's definitely something that we definitely want to be thinking about, and something that I kind of wish that we planned for in the beginning, just in terms of costing and thinking about, okay, what is that going to look like? What do we need to set up to support something like that? So yeah, I definitely recommend, if anybody is starting a brand and wanting to incorporate that into their business model, to start thinking about it in the beginning, because I think it's amazing what they're doing, and we definitely want to adopt something like that.
I so appreciate your honesty in this process, because I think it's helpful for others who are starting to recognize, like, hey, not everything goes right from the very beginning, and it's okay to pivot. I mean, that's why there's books on the subject of pivoting. And so I applaud you for recognizing the need to do that. And I'm so excited for your brand, and congratulations for the collaboration with Magnolia and everything.
Yeah.
The chat, I don't know if you have been looking, has been quite active. And we also have received several questions from everybody. You're welcome to please submit more questions if you have them as we go, but I thought I'd invite everybody to rejoin us and maybe go through some of the questions that have been submitted. The one that strikes me is one that was in the chat on the screen. And Tyla, it kind of addresses what you were talking about with the magnets and the mining, that the bigger ethical question for this particular person was, would not using those magnets then eliminate their only source of income? Do you see a balance that you worry about with that?
I mean, number one, me as a small company not using magnets is not really making that much of a dent in the industry yet. I'm pretty small. However, you know, it's me sort of teaching this education that I want other people to really sort of grasp. Number two, there are organizations that go in and help teach other ways of life, which is what's currently going on with the Mica issue. It looks like I'm like crying with the sun. Sorry. But basically, you know, yes, it's definitely a valid question. And yes, you can't just like leave somebody high and dry. Of course not. However, there are organizations that specialize in this thing. That's what the Fair Trade Organization does, is really going in and validating and also understanding, you know, what's going on in the space. I tried to work with the Fair Trade Organization when I was working at Sephora, specifically with Mica, and it's actually really complicated to get a certain ingredient or a certain category added to that, because there is so much work that goes in. But there is the Mica Initiative that is coming directly out of India, and there are so many huge conglomerates behind it, because they're, to their credit, there is, you know, it is hard to just pull out when they're so big and there are so many people that affect their livelihood, but they're going in and re-educating and making more communities. So it's definitely twofold. You can't just pull out, but for me, since I'm starting brand new, you know, I'm not an Estee Lauder or anything that's been utilizing these people for, you know, many, many years and decades, but I can choose where to source my materials. It's a lot easier to create a sustainable brand from the get-go versus going in and trying to fix everything. Which, you know, a lot of brands actually end up using Terracycle when it comes to recycling. And I know there were some questions that were initially sent to you regarding Terracycle. And Terracycle is a great resource, but for me, Terracycle is a Band-Aid. I really believe brands should be putting products out there that it shouldn't be that hard for the consumer to understand what happens to them when they're finished with the products.
Can you define Terracycle for people who may not be familiar with it?
Sure. So Terracycle is sort of a third party in between the recycling infrastructures and the communities. So it is a business-based business that basically I, as a brand, so I actually use Terracycle, but I use Terracycle for not a normal reason that people usually use Terracycle. Terracycle can, in theory, recycle any product. So all the things you've heard me say, mirrors, magnets, you know, there's so much thing, black plastic, like plastic number 2467 can't get recycled. Like there's so many things that can't get recycled in our infrastructures, but Terracycle will take it and work with people that in theory will recycle it. Now they're not transparent about who they're working with. And also it's very expensive for brands. So I started working with them because so many communities are letting go of their recycling programs. So over 500 institutions closed last year alone of recycling facilities, and people are incinerating instead. So I'm doing all this work to make product that actually can go back into our cycle. I wanted to make sure those people have access to recyclability. So I actually signed up with Terracycle, and it's easy for someone, if they want to recycle Āether beauty goods, you go on the Terracycle website and you just click on it and you will get an envelope sent to you. So you just put your stuff in the envelope and send it to Terracycle. However, it's incredibly expensive for a brand. So for me to do that, 250 envelopes cost me $7,500. That's over $30 an envelope. And that's more than what the product costs. So that's not really a viable solution for me. And, you know, again, there is a need because it's a Band-Aid, because people aren't designing products that work within our infrastructures and are using materials that, that aren't working for us. It's not working for our planet. It's not working for the people. I mean, can have a whole other segment on bioplastic, but, you know, growing, you know, plants for plastic is something I have a lot of stuff to say about. So anyway,
Allison, I see you. Yes, definitely. Allison, I see you nodding along. I know this is sort of your space as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
You know how I feel about recycling. I mean, I think it's really twofold. It's the true cost accounting of what goes into the product. So us as brands deciding what we're going to put into the product and whether or not we're going to be able to accept it back and make it circular, right? Because at this moment, circularity is not scalable, right?
Can I pause you real quick? Because I did see one person ask earlier when we referenced circular. What do we mean by that? Can you just explain quickly?
So the expectation is you have this sweater, and that when I'm done with it, I've sold it on whatever website, and that person has then decided that that hole is not repairable, even though they've tried to repair multiples, and then it officially has to go to be textile recycled, is that there isn't a place where they can recycle it and will get put back into yarn and then go back into the apparel supply chain. So in an ideal world, we'd have a bin, or we'd be able to throw our apparel waste into the same bin with the rest of our recycle, and then it would get recycled. But that's a very local solution because a textile scraps wastes are extremely heavy, and we all know once, you know, China stops accepting our recycled goods, you have to have local purchasers for that, because people are not shipping around containers of apparel waste to get recycled. It's just easier to burn it and throw it away. So same thing, like I think we need to think about the true cost accounting of a product and whether or not it can actually get recycled, whether or not the grommets and the buttons on your jeans are going to cause the textile recycler to just cut it straight off at the waist and only recycle the legs and throw the rest away. And then the customer also, like, Carol has said as well, we have to have the business case. The customer needs to use their purchasing power to express both what they want and what they don't want. So purchase what you don't want. Your voice is heard when you're not buying it, and it's also heard when you're buying it, right? And be savvy customers in what you're purchasing, and how long are you going to keep it for? How maintainable is it? And then I think there's a lot of value in these these renewed products, like Carol showed through the Renewal Workshop. We did that through SMC's fashion school as well. They took a lot of our scraps and made beautiful designs, and you have this this tenderness towards it, something that you just feel so proud of. You want to keep forever. That's really how we should think about our day-to-day clothes.
Carol, this it kind of is natural to you because we talked about the purchase power that Allison just referenced of that consumer. So you have the case study for it with the Renewed collection. One of the questions was, how well is it selling? Curious to know what happens to the products that don't sell and if consumers are actually responding to these Renewed products.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've engaged with consumers in a couple of pretty unique ways. We have an athlete team. So we've got skiers, snowboarders, climbers like Alex Honnold. We actually leveraged them for some unique upcycled chalk bags that we made with scraps from like our Noopsy jackets, our thermoball jackets. We auctioned those for our Explore Fund grant giving program as well. And they were a big hit, as you can imagine. So we're trying to leverage like unique opportunities to engage our consumers to do that demand creation and also show them like these are great products that are fun. It's an opportunity to own a unique TNF item. And Renewed is doing really well. It's grown exponentially since we launched it in 2018, and we expect to continue to grow it.
It's so interesting to think about like buying the product that is, I love your description of it as like a Frankenstein. Do you find the case for the consumer is about the Frankenstein piece, that it's unique in its look, or is the consumer more interested in actually the purchase of it, right? Like the story behind that it is recycled?
I think it's going to depend, but I think it's a mixture of both. Being able to own a one-of-a-kind piece. We use a lot of our classic styles, so our Noopsy jacket, which is very iconic to the North Face. Only through Renewed can you buy one that has like a fun print patched on it. You can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that at a wholesale account like Nordstrom. You can't get it on our own e-com site right now. So I think there's that element, and then that customer is also more conscientious and looking for that lower impact product.
Jasmine, I think this is a good question for you that just came in. Would the prices of sustainable products ever be able to be as affordable as products produced in the fast fashion or fast beauty industries? And if not, what ways can consumers be more ethical? What are you finding as you start a brand and build a brand?
Yeah, I think, of course, when you are producing on smaller quantities, the prices are going to be higher to begin with. So I think that when we're scaling and making more, we can bring the cost down a little. There's little things that we can do, but it's never going to be the point of you can get a $2 t-shirt, which why would you want to, So I don't think it'll be at that point, but I think for us as a brand, as we grow, there'll be things that we can do. And I think that there's other ways that you can shop and not buy a $200 jumpsuit. There are, like for us, we also do lower price point items that are still sustainable using organic fabric. So t-shirts or that kind of thing, or even thrifting. And so there's ways around it and ways to find affordable pieces and still be sustainable.
Allison, this is a bit of a longer question, but I think there's value in asking it. It's one of our students at FIDM who's in the textile design program at the college. She's trying to wrap her head around the starting points of retraining consumers and customers, even the economy, the world government, about how public companies are going to move away from the cycle of fast fashion and excessive materialism. She offers some different thoughts on it, but I'm wondering what your thought might be around this. How do we retrain the consumer? What does the public company's responsibility, how does that play into it?
I mean, I think we all need to think about our overconsumption model and we need to remind ourselves of the Marie Kondo, does it bring you joy? And does the excess bring you joy? And as I gave Tom that example, is like when you're going into the closet and you're pushing over those hangers again and nothing fits anymore, does that bring you joy? Or should we all slow down and instead of buying 5 shirts, buy one really good shirt, because we've noticed we keep wearing that one shirt over and over again, especially in this last 9 months, right? And just make a conscious effort to just buy one really good high quality t-shirt and take care of it. Follow the care instructions on the label and take good care of it. And when it's done, hopefully recycle it. And if it's not, then you buy it again 10 years later, 5 years later, or 3, like Tyla mentioned about the palette, which is 3 to 4 years for that makeup palette is amazing. So think about, really take a look at our drawers and think about what we need, what we don't need, what we really wear, what we're not wearing, and then search out one high quality product in that category.
Tyla, a question that I'm going to put towards you that was begun for focus on fashion, but I think has application in the beauty space as well. So think of this from a marketer as sort of the way she's asking this question. How do you communicate to a low budget consumer that the $5.99 top or the 99-cent lip liner that they're buying that is harming the planet is actually, they should not buy and should go for the $35.99 piece or the more expensive? I feel like that's what you're addressing in your company. So in a brief marketing point, how do you do that?
Sure. I mean, there's all different ways to address it to the consumer. So there's education, which is hugely important in this space. That's why I write a weekly blog, because even if I say the same thing over and over and over again, like I'm not talking to the same people every day. So it's getting the messages out to more people. But basically, depending on which sort of model you want to go after, you can say, okay, if you buy this $5.99 top, do you know how many people have touched it? Do you know what their wage is? Do you know they're probably making $300 a month, working 70 hours a week and can't leave and can't see their family? Is that something you want to support? Like, it's really about transparency and, using letting people understand, like people don't even know what fair trade is. Like, the reason for fair trade is that, even in the Mica situation with tons of child labor and tons of horrible things going on with Mica, the reason why this is happening is because we pay nothing for it. It's like 30 cents a pound and people resell it on the market for like $1,200. Like there is a huge gap there, and that's insanity. Like by the time it gets to the manufacturer, how much something costs compared how much it's costing the person who's actually basically doing the work. So really understanding our economies, understanding how products are made. Nobody sees this. It's all like behind the curtains. It's all hush hush. It's all marketing. Some celebrity has a new freaking brand off of Instagram in every single sector and it like sells out. But people don't understand what the heck they're buying. In my space, they're buying products with Teflon in their makeup. Whether or not you're like a clean beauty supplier, like we all know Teflon is not something you probably should put on your skin, right? Considering now it's in our waterways and we're drinking it and babies are born with PFOAs. But it's just a way of educating your client. Yeah. And if your message, it's a fine line to, use fear mongering versus facts. There's this, for some reason in January, there's always this anti-clean rhetoric that happens on social media. People are like, clean beauty is dead. Clean beauty doesn't mean anything, blah, 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 all these things, which it stems from like greenwashing. It stems from no rules and regulations in the space, which we so desperately need. But it's this weird concept that like, oh, well, I never got cancer, so like it's fine for me. And I attribute it to, I have this great analogy that I just want to share, because it's like, okay, you're in a car. I've never been in a car accident, so why should I wear my seatbelt, sort of thing? Well, you're going to wear your seatbelt because if you don't, you're going to die. Oh, well, that's fear mongering. Like, what is the balance between educating your client and telling them, these sort of facts that are facts versus fake news, false information, all this stuff that keeps happening? So For
Right.
me, that is like a bigger topic. And it's like my biggest fear is having small children and they don't even understand what's real and what's not by the time they grow up. So there's a lot of different issues in general with consumer in the whatever space, but education is really key, and quality, like I don't think people really want to throw things out.
I want to get in one last question, and I recognize we're at the end of our hour, but this may take a couple extra seconds. But to each of you, what is the one wish you would like to see developed? What solution, what technology to move towards circular fashion or zero waste? And Carol, I'll start with you, if you don't mind, briefly. What is that one wish that you might have to get us to the finish line?
Oh gosh. I really, as a very large global brand, I really hope that we will get the same activity that we're seeing in the States globally, because we really need regional circularity infrastructure hubs where our consumers are across the world. And in the States, we've got amazing companies like Upcycle It Now in Long Beach. They're a small company, and there are companies coming up in the EU and also in Asia. So that's exciting.
So from the large global company, Jasmine, to the small startup, what's your one wish? Oh, turn your mic on.
I told you I would do that.
You did.
My one wish is that we don't have to have conversations like this anymore, that this is not rare, because I think, it's still such a unique topic for some reason, and that it becomes an industry standard, which I see it kind of going that way as the years go on. I think we're all trying to figure it out, but I think that, I just wish that this conversation would become more normalized.
Allison, what's yours?
I'm on the same page as Carol. I would say localized solutions for textile recycling, so I don't have to make the business case internally to move trash around the world, actually put it back into my product, which is, as far as the emissions go, not effective. And also not have to explain to the consumer why I can't recycle their t-shirt when my t-shirt manufacturer is in Guatemala.
Tyla, how about you?
So it can be any wish.
Any wish.
That, it could be kind of impossible.
I mean, maybe make it tangible, something that's actually
we have a Democratic majority now, so maybe. But my thoughts would be that companies would have to be financially responsible for the products they put out in the world. So if it has to get recycled, then they get a tax for it. If the consumer can use it over and over again, then there's no tax. So like having switching the mindset that's the consumer's responsibility back onto the manufacturer and back onto the brand. That is my biggest wish. Whatever happened here, I don't know. The EU, maybe. New Zealand, maybe. Other places, maybe. Here, not so much, but you never know.
There's some interesting research that you actually pointed me to, Tyla, that talks to why we in our country, at least, have made this focus and put the onus on the consumer. And I invite all of you watching to just do a little Googling. Some research on your own will actually empower you quite a bit with data and information on all of this. I cannot thank the four of you enough. This has been one of our most interested in topics, and obviously the conversation has just been super compelling. So thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Thanks everybody at home as well. We will be next month talking about the future of data, which I have to tell you, I think will be just as compelling as today's conversation. And as you already heard, there's overlap between the two. When we send out the thank you for attending, which will also include a link to the recording of today's event, there will also be an RSVP link to next month's event on the future of data. Until we meet again, we at FIDM, of course, always encourage you to stay inspired and tell you to have a nice and pleasant and maybe green afternoon.
Tom?